What's up, everyone? I have been getting a lot of questions recently about what my study regimen was like for learning Japanese and how I learned Japanese. If you've watched some of my other videos, I outlined how I was an exchange student in Japan and a bunch of other stuff. But a lot of my language learning ultimately was self-taught. So I thought that I would give you guys my secret of how I studied and how I self-taught Japanese. A shitload of manga and anime and J-pop. Okay, all joking aside, that really is how I learned Japanese. I never studied. I never had vocabulary lists and read through them. I never looked at textbooks and did worksheets and stuff like that. I mean, I did in my first 2 years of high school Japanese, which again, I think if you're going to learn a language, it's really good to have that foundation. So take like 1 year at least of some kind of instruction, adult education, high school, junior college, college, whatever you can get your hands on. Try to get a year of actual instruction in a class full of people that are also learning. But if you're gonna be self-taught, I mean, everybody's different, every learning style is different, but for me, at least, I can't learn things by just reading and studying. I get so bored and my brain starts wandering and thinking about other more interesting things, and the stuff just does not go into my head. I'm also an auditory learner, not a visual learner, so I learn a lot easier by watching videos or by listening to things rather than reading things. So if all of this is sounding familiar and you're struggling with learning Japanese for reasons that I was kind of talking about right now, know that you're not alone and that there is a way to learn the language still. Also, I just feel like if you're gonna learn a language by textbooks, languages, they're things that you should be using, right? And even if you're learning a language, you should have a reason for learning it other than just you want to know the language. I mean, you should want to go to that country and talk to people. You should want to watch anime, which, by the way, that's a perfectly valid and noble excuse for wanting to become fluent in Japanese. That's why I became fluent in Japanese. So if you really want to just learn Japanese so you can understand anime without subtitles, like, own it and go for it. And that's a perfectly good reason for wanting to learn Japanese. But you should have a reason, right? It should be a language that you're actually going to be using. Because if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. It really is true. And if you're learning the language by just flipping through vocabulary cards or using vocabulary apps, you're not really going to necessarily retain that information. So now that I've bashed traditional forms of learning and studying, I'm going to explain what I did specifically. So my best friend was definitely manga. This, by the way, is a wonderful series. It's called Tokimeki Tonight by Ike no Koi. She's actually native to the region that I was living in, so there was that connection. But it's really good shoujo manga from the 80s. So it's kind of old, harder to find, but it's great, and you should definitely check it out if you can. But yeah, manga. I read, okay, in my year in Japan and continuing, like a few years after I came back from Japan. So for a good 5 years probably, I read pretty much three volumes of manga a day. And this is like the full tankobon, which is like 150 to sometimes 200 pages. And I mean, if you look, it's not super dense. There's not like tons of writing. And I also recommend shoujo manga because this is gonna sound sexist, but it's just true. It tends to be a lot easier to understand than shonen. And they also tend to have furigana next to the kanji, at least next to the difficult ones. Like this one you can see, maybe, my camera is not the best. Some of the kanji have furigana next to them, but some of them don't. The ones that don't have furigana next to them are like the first level easier kanji that you're supposed to know if you're in 3rd grade and reading this. So yeah, it's very helpful though. Yeah, I read about 3 of these a day. And again, it wasn't to study, it was because I love manga and I really like the stories and the characters and I really got into them. And I didn't read 3 volumes a day because, ooh, I gotta get my 3 volumes a day. And it's like, no, it's because I really liked the series and I wanted to know what happened next. So I read about 3 volumes of manga a day. The second thing I did was I listened to a lot of J-pop and J-rock and anime music. And not only did I listen to, I listened to this music at least 2 hours a day, every single day. Probably more than that if I'm being honest. I'd have it on in the background while I sewed. I'd have it on in the background while I exercised. I would just have it on and I would just actively listen to it. And in doing so, I would look at the lyrics sheets in the CD cases, and I would struggle through, and while listening to the songs, I would be reading. So if there were kanji I didn't know, I would hear the singer singing them. And then sometimes I learned the kanji a little incorrectly that way, but from those mistakes, I would then learn how the kanji are supposed to be pronounced. But yeah, I'd memorized so many of these songs. At one point, I counted how many songs I had memorized J-pop and anime, and it was at least 500. And of those 500 songs, I also had sat down with a dictionary and gone through and picked out some of the words so that I could figure out what the songs meant. And again, not because, oh, I have to study Japanese and I have to just translate these songs so I can learn. No, I genuinely really, really loved these songs. This is TM Revolution, by the way. Yeah, and I really loved the music. I really loved the songs, and I wanted to know what they meant. And so I listened to them obsessively and memorized them and sang them at karaoke. And then another thing that I did was I watched a lot of anime. How much anime did I watch daily? I mean, it did vary. It really went downhill after a while. Like, I used to be really into anime before I went to Japan, and then afterwards I was a lot more into manga. But I still probably watched on average 1 to 2 hours of anime a day. And again, not because, oh, I have to watch it so I can learn Japanese, but no, I genuinely like anime, and I genuinely liked the series I was watching. So if you add up all the hours that I did daily in terms of studying, I did, 3 volumes of manga a day, which was probably about 2 hours of reading, and then about 2 hours of listening to songs, and then about 1 hour a day of watching anime. So I studied for maybe about 5 hours a day in Japanese, which is actually a lot. But it was all doing things that I loved doing, so it wasn't a chore at all. It was fun things that I would have been doing anyway, and I had a lot of fun, and I retained the words and the language so much better that way. My year in Japan, of course, was intensified because any other time of the day that I was talking to somebody, it was in Japanese, or any time of the day that I was listening to somebody, it was in Japanese, so there was also that. But yeah, a year in Japan of that frequency of, watching anime and reading manga and listening to music, plus people talking to me, and then plus another couple years after that of just intensive reading manga, watching anime, and listening to J-pop and anime. About that long, about after those 3 years, I feel like I really became a lot more fluent in Japanese. The first year definitely in Japan was the biggest one that really got me kickstarted, but the 2 years after that, I really fine-tuned a lot of my understanding of the vocabulary and grammar rules in Japanese. If you learned Japanese, how did you do it? Sound off in the comments. And I have a Facebook page now, so you can go ahead and like that and follow me there. Also, let me know what anime series you're into right now, because I'm looking into new ones and I'm interested in watching cool anime. Bye!